There we go. Good evening, guys. I'll just give it a few seconds to catch up where we can. We are live. There we go. Hi, guys. Welcome to The Accidental Journalist, Live and Undrugged, episode 34. Our 1 year anniversary of me live streaming and podcasting. To be honest, I didn't think I'd get past a few months, and it's been a bit difficult at times, but we've really pushed through. So tonight I wanted to celebrate that by getting my first ever guest back on, Jason Edwards, the negotiator. As always, we are supported by and sponsored by No Means City Clothing and Armour Scaffolding. And we're going to be speaking about something that it might be a bit hard to listen to, but we're going to be talking about kidnap, and some of the things surrounding that, some of the psychology surrounding that. Good evening, Jason. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Jack, good evening. It's an absolute honour and a pleasure to be back 1 year in. Like you say, it's been a real achievement. Congratulations, well done.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So,
yeah, I wanted to talk about something that I work very much indirectly on the periphery of, but something that's been an interest of mine. I know it's a strange thing to say as an interest of mine, but as I tell you a little bit more, you'll understand where I'm coming from. But it's kind of two things that I want to talk about tonight and really differentiate between the two subject matters. One is hostage negotiation and the other is kidnap for ransom. And a lot of the time people don't always distinguish between these two areas. A lot of the work that I do is sort of the back end of some of this when it involves trauma and people have been held captive in traumatic states, traumatic relationships. And obviously with some of the work that I've done previously as a negotiator and some of the work that I do now as a crisis negotiator and mediator has buffered up against it. But the main difference, a lot of people ask me about the difference between what's the difference between a plain hostage negotiation and a kidnap and ransom is. We're actually going to stray into a really controversial territory tonight, Jack.
right.
In an area that some people are really uncomfortable with, in that one is a police procedure and the other one is very much an industry. And the industry side of it, some people are dead against, as I'll explain a little bit more. But first of all, the main difference is if there's a situation that's a hostage negotiation, a barricaded situation where people are being held against their will, there's normally a police intervention. You'll have professional, and they are really good, particularly in the UK and the States, police crisis negotiators who will attend on scene, and they have an outcome. And their outcome will be the safe release of the hostages, but they will also want to bring the perpetrators to justice.
Yeah.
The difference with the kidnap and ransom industry is there's no police involvement at all. You actually deal with a specialist team that normally employed by an insurance broker, and it's about a negotiation to actually release someone that's being held captive, but the criminals don't get brought to justice. And this is where it gets a little bit controversial.
Right.
Now, kidnap and ransom consultancy is always assumed to be very prominent in places like South America, Africa, the Far East. And a lot of the time it also comes about because some of the local police forces can't be actually trusted. And a lot of the time they're actually behind or in on the kidnappings.
Mm.
So that's the main distinction between the two areas that I wanted to sort of discuss tonight.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
sorry, go ahead.
no, that's all right. I was discussing this with a friend of mine at church about a guy by the name of Matt Hurd, and he was a missionary in Kathmandu,
Yeah,
and they were taught at the start to carry $1,000 with them in the pocket in
yeah,
case they were
yeah,
kidnapped, so they could bribe themselves out
yeah.
of any sort of situation.
And towards the end of the evening, there's a couple of things that I actually do want to talk about. And please don't think that I'm trying to fearmonger or scaremonger, but and there's a BBC documentary that backs this up that I
Mm-hmm.
watched quite recently that was brilliantly produced by a young journalist. It's still on iPlayer, of how kidnapping, ransom in a very different form that I'll explain is becoming very prevalent in the UK. And it's quite scary, particularly in some of the inner cities. And also, what I'd like to do on the back of that is to actually give you some general tactics and a strategy what to do should you ever be involved in that situation.
That'd be good.
Because people don't necessarily consider crime, people protect themselves from various sorts of crime, but as something that used to just be gang on gang related is now actually moving towards a gang on, shall we say, civilian related. And
Yeah.
there's on the increase more and more people being abducted in these very short kidnappings. Just to
Mm.
give you a little bit of a potted history, actually, because it's quite interesting how the world of actual crisis negotiation and hostage negotiations developed. You don't actually consider that it's something that's actually quite recent. In our lifetimes, Jack, there were some terrible situations where people were barricaded and held hostage. And by their own admission, the security services back then really didn't have a lot of key skills in how to deal with it.
Mm.
I think the Attica prison riots in the 70s that are referenced in, if you ever seen the movie, you'll have seen the movie Dog Day Afternoon,
Yeah.
which is about a bank robbery, was an absolute travesty and lots of people lost their lives.
Mm.
There was also an incident that took place with the FBI, terrorist situation on a runway, I think it was at Dallas Airport, where a shootout again broke out. And again, there was an incredible loss of life. So
Mm.
what people actually started to consider was, we need a different way of dealing with this. There are situations where you cannot just shoot your way out of.
Mm.
And there were some of the early pioneers, people like Joe Navarro, who's written some brilliant books on body language, and he's done some great guides that you can find. Some of them are free, they're on Amazon. Started to develop, using psychology, ways to actually approach a hostage situation to maybe bring about a peaceful resolution. Now, within all the work I always do, my bottom line is, cause no harm, do no harm. Always looking for the peaceful outcome in anything I do. And there was a time when some of the early tactics that they used were not amazingly effective, but they were certainly better than the old strategy, which used to be. And sadly, there's a lot of guys who've referenced this now. The only tactic they really would have was they would use, they would get a trained psychiatrist in, or a psychologist, or somebody that could actually talk to someone, literally just to maneuver
Yeah.
one of the actual hostage takers in a position to where a sharpshooter could take them out. And there was still, sadly, a high loss and a high level of risk with that. But then something happened. Something happened along the way. A couple of things became very relevant. And after a couple of incidents, something sprung up, which was a book that I bought many years ago that was used and referenced And it was a book called Getting to Yes by a chap named Will Urey and Roger Fisher. And it's negotiating an agreement without giving in. And people started to talk about principled negotiation. And this is where it started to get a little bit into a grey area, because people were suddenly starting to try and negotiate effectively with people who were in really high stress crisis situations, and to talk about getting a positive resolution. Not literally, the old thing we had was the idea of people just putting up a microphone and literally, throw your guns out, put your hands up and come on out. Was literally starting to try and generate some understanding for what was going on the other side of the barrier. Literally what was going on for the people, trying to get into the minds of the criminals. This became quite effective, but then another mammoth leap forward took place, and this is in really recent years that we're talking. But there's a gentleman who I had the incredible good fortune to train with, by the name of Chris Voss. And Chris Voss was the former lead international FBI hostage negotiator. And he started to work with the FBI when, as he put it, they actually started to get kind of like warm and friendly with empathy. They, like these tough guys at the FBI were learning how to connect on a humanistic level with terrorists, with hostage takers, with people suffering mental health problems. And again, what came out of that was something phenomenal, which was another leap forward. It was a book by Chris Voss called Never Split the Difference, which is for anyone ever looking for a different perspective on negotiation. This gentleman, Chris Voss, has negotiated some of the toughest situations in the history of the FBI. But it's a book that is so incredible because all he talks about are human emotions. All he talks about is tactical empathy. And it was something, like I said, I got to study with him, got to understand how he worked, and it literally changed the way that my mind works and the way that my mind thinks. And this is kind of like where things really started to actually peak, and people started to very much look at not just the tactical situation, but the pure empathetic situation of actually building a strong connection. And people say to me, what do you do if there's ever a crisis situation, if ever there's a tough situation? I only do two things. I build empathy and I ask great questions. That's literally all I do. I never, ever, ever give a command. It's literally just trying to understand people and understand what's driving those emotions in order to literally help people let go of them. And the therapeutic approach that I take can be 10 times more effective than old-fashioned hard bargaining and negotiation. In fact, Chris Voss recently did a brilliant blog that made me laugh, because it was all about, it said in big letters, do you want to be a tough negotiator? Do you want to learn how to be a hard negotiator? Do you want to know how to negotiate hard? And when you actually opened up the blog, it said, don't. It literally just went, it's kind of absolutely the last thing you ever want to do. There's an old saying about we attract more as it flies with honey than vinegar. And recently, some of the work that I did, I had to negotiate a very tough situation that was going on in a community with a gentleman who, without putting too fine a point on it, Jack, he wasn't the most Christian of gentlemen, shall we say. And he was running a small, shall we say, enterprise that wasn't exactly strictly legal.
Right.
But that wasn't my remit. That wasn't my remit to actually judge, jury over what this guy chose to do with his time. It was actually how to help out the local community around him. And by being empathetic towards, should we say, his chosen profession, and negotiating with him around that, we actually managed to bring out a positive solution that kind of fitted everyone. And it sounds very controversial, but a lot of the time, the work that people start to get into in negotiation, it's very grey area. You are talking very, very grey area. And it was, it amused the hell out of me, because towards the end, the guy actually phoned me back to very much thank me for the work that he'd done. And I thought, yeah, okay. I thought, you've got to be careful, my friend, because what you're doing is time limited. I'm not going to be a brilliant long-term outcome, but should we say it managed to rein his resources in, and it wasn't affecting those people around him. So while we always have to make sure we're on the side of the angels, always reminds me a bit of the superhero Wolverine. He's a good guy, but some of the places where he goes to do his work isn't always a great area to be working in. And I think a lot of this stems out of even looking at some of the more famous historical cases now. I recently listened to an audiobook by Joe Navarro, who was at the Waco siege, I believe. And he had said, I don't think he was actually at that status level where he was calling the shots, but the local sheriff had such a good relationship with David Koresh. From anybody, if you're not familiar with Waco, it was where the Branch Davidians compounded themselves in America. And there was all kind of concerns for what was going on with the families, but they bunkered themselves in, and the FBI kind of brought in tanks, and a firefight broke out, and there was a terrible loss of life on both sides. But at the very beginning, the local sheriff was on great terms, was good speaking terms with David Koresh. And this is not saying that any one particular person was right or wrong, but he actually said, if they'd have let me go in there, I could have had a chat with David, and it'd have probably just come out on his own. Yeah. It'd have probably just come out, because he had that lovely interpersonal relationship. It made that connection with him. And, sometimes, what was the Bond film where the guy said to Felix Leiter, yeah, maybe we should only try and deal with nice people in future.
Was that License to Kill?
It was, it was one of the more recent ones. It's always a line that made me laugh, where they were talking about the guy they were doing business with, and he went, yeah, maybe we should only deal with nice people. And sometimes there are certain areas of work you go into where you're not always dealing with the greatest of people, but you can get a really positive outcome. And I think I'm very fortunate, because I've got a very different remit. I can keep that little sort of step away. But it was looking at famous cases like Attica. It was looking at famous cases, like what had happened with the Branch Davidians and David Koresh, and realizing that, you know what, a lot of innocent people didn't have to die that day. And like I say, I know it's a very, very controversial area to stray into, but from literally looking at different ways to respond, react, negotiate, a more empathetic, understanding areas come up. And this is not about being soft on crime or anything like that. It is about approaching a hostile, tense situation and actually looking at it with a level of tactical empathy, of Chris Voss always says, and empathizing with a current situation and just building rapport with people in the worst situation to actually maybe get everyone come out safely. And of course, these days, I think one of the amusing things is in Voss's book, he actually talks about he went to Harvard Law School. He wanted to get and he wanted to attend their prestigious negotiation course. And it was one of the highest ranking courses that anyone can attend. And he talked his way into it. You know, he was quite well known in his career. And they had to do a mock negotiation. And he kept beating all these Harvard graduates. He just kept knocking them down like nine pins. And he said they were going for these old-fashioned techniques like looking at BATNAs, best alternatives to negotiated agreements, and all these different margins. And he said all he was just doing was using empathy. He said, basically, I felt like all I was doing to them was going, no, no, I'm not going to do that. And, you know, how am I supposed to do that? You know, they were saying, well, we'd like this. And he went, well, how am I supposed to do that? And that's a technique he uses a lot. It was something they learned, just to give you a brief example. It's one of the best leaps of faith that was ever discovered in this FBI hostage negotiation course. They were approached one day by a drug dealer whose girlfriend had been kidnapped by a rival drug dealer. So even if you're a drug dealer, what do you do when your girlfriend's been kidnapped? You go to the FBI. And they got him on the phone to talk to the guy who had his girlfriend held prisoner. And instead of going for the old looking for a proof of life, the guy was literally saying, you know, like, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. And the guy just said something amazing. He just went, yeah, dog, how am I supposed to do that? And the guy who had the girl held hostage went, yeah, I don't know. That's a good point. He went, yeah, how am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to trust you? And he went, oh, okay, hang on. I'll get your girl on the phone. And they just went, oh, my God, that's brilliant. That is absolutely amazing. And that's how a lot of it works, is instead of saying to someone, well, you know, we require proof of life here as we won't negotiate. You know, when this guy said, you know, I want you to give me several $1,000s, I've got your girl. And he went, well, am I supposed to do that? And a lot of the time it's this building this tactical empathy where you actually get those people who are on the opposite side of the fence to kind of work with you. Now, while that's a very legit and very courageous industry, and it like I say, it is operated by and it is policed by some brilliant people who are on ball and get called to various crisis situations. The other side of what's always fascinated me about this world is almost like the flip side of it, and it's the actual kidnap and ransom industry that I became aware of many years ago and didn't actually realize there was a strong distinction within those two words. And the funny thing is, like a lot of the inspiration of what's guided me towards various areas, it came out of a flaming television program, didn't it? And I even managed to find the old you'll like this, Jack, I've got some old DVDs here. Many years ago, just trying to see what the actual age of it was. There you go, 2011. Trevor Eve, it did an amazing TV series that only ran for 2 series called Kidnap and Ransom, where he played a kidnap and ransom consultant called Dominic King. And what I did at the time was I became kind of fascinated with how that world works, because it's always been that kind of position that I've been in a lot of the time, where you work alongside people, but you're kind of that half a step away. And doing a lot of research into it, reading about it, talking to people who've been in around that world, you get a very, very different perspective on the whole world of hostage negotiation. There's no doubt about it. This is a business. And they very much get used to dealing with the same people time and time again. Like I say, it's really controversial. A lot of people don't think it should be taking place because I'm okay, we don't actually have a constitution, but the US has a constitution, and we have a sort of a former constitution that states you do not negotiate with terrorists. You don't bargain with terrorists. But I think one of the things that became very relevant for a lot of insurance companies who were taking on kidnap and ransom insurance in some very, very unsavory areas, some very unstable areas of Africa, of South America, was what was actually happening was most hostages were actually being killed not through the terrorists, but in shootouts when the police were attempting to rescue them. Now, I'm no one to make comments on security forces around the world. I don't sit in a forward position, and I don't carry a gun or anything like that. And I've got some highly trained officers that are fantastic in their role. But so many people are actually dying. And like I say, some of these third world countries, the police were actually involved in the kidnaps and were kind of letting them happen. So what they decided to do, they built an industry around it, in that they actually started hiring initially security consultants, specialists that had military or police background, in an attempt to actually not just say, okay, well, do you know what? You've kidnapped this guy. Okay, he's insured. We've got some money. Yeah, we'll drop that off and you let him go, because it's like a game of chess, Jack. It is so complex. And one of the most famous people of all, who wrote an amazing book, it's not his real name, it's a guy called Ben Lopez. And I became aware of Ben Lopez because him and I had an identical background. We both started off in therapeutic services and care services. And I think we're both guided towards doing something else. So we've both got this very clinical background and therapeutic background. And he became involved because initially he started providing support for people who had been held captive, been held as, for ransom, and were suffering with a lot of trauma. Now, a lot of the time, this is sort of where some of the work that I come in on is sometimes people are ex-security services, ex-special forces, or believe it not, people who have been in long-term, and I know it sounds like I'm going from one thing to another here, very abusive relationships, have been held in the same long-term kidnap situation. And it's incredibly traumatic, and they suffer with all the same psychosis. So it was somewhere I became along the lines and started to work with people who have been held in long-term, short-term traumatic situation. Now, one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to talk about this tonight is what we're kind of experiencing. And like I said, it's really not anything that I want to, I don't want to, certainly no moral panic involved or anything like that, is it's actually on the increase in the UK. For a while now, something I became aware of through the bizarrest method. And the bizarrest thing I heard was that not only, I mean, it is quite rare still to have like a very high level kidnap and ransom take place in the UK, but it does happen. Um, Somebody told me, and I'm not sure whether this is true or not, that Harrods many years ago built, and it's still there and people use it, an exclusive entrance and exit with an underground car park for their gold card customers to leave, because some of them were being abducted on the way out because it was rich pickings for kidnappers. You know, it's pretty obvious. If you've got someone coming out of Harrods loaded down,
Yeah.
go into their car, they're loaded. They might even be connected. And these weren't very well thought through kidnappings. They weren't really planned very well. So what they actually do, they have a special entrance, very elitist. It just kind of gives you an idea of some of the lengths that Harrods had gone to protect the safety of their customers from kidnapping. Now, at the moment, in globally, there's a bit of an epidemic. There's something between 10 to 20,000 kidnaps take place a year. Wow. And kind of scary. And a lot of these kidnap consultants are incredibly overworked people. Because of kind of what we're talking of now, more and more takes place virtually, takes place online. But what's actually happened, and what I'd urge you to do, is just take a look on BBC iPlayer. It's still on there. I had to check. I think I can't think what it's called, but if you just Google BBC iPlayer kidnap documentary, there's a fascinating 30-minute documentary that's on there about the state of UK and kidnappings within inner city areas. So what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about that tonight. And like I say, if that's something that you actually kind of in fear of, if that's something that you think you could encounter, just some of the things to be mindful of, because there's about 6 different styles now of kidnapping, and they're not all as you would imagine. And I think first and foremost, what you actually get is something that we've become quite used to in the UK, sadly. And these are the ones that get more, they're called express kidnappings. And this is where people are literally snatched from the street, or sometimes, and I'm not saying it's all of them, obviously, sometimes taxi drivers themselves are part of it, where people will be abducted. So, and then literally driven from ATM to ATM to ATM, bank machine to bank machine, take as much money as you can. They will then hold you overnight and then wait till the next morning and then literally get you to empty your bank machine again and again and again. And this is one of the ones that's becoming really frequent. It's like I say, it's moved away now from gangs and it's moved on to civilians, because I think what people have actually realized with something like an express kidnapping for an actual kidnapper, it's really lucrative. It's really lucrative for them to do that. And it's not like you've got a victimless crime here, because that person then suffers some really deep-rooted trauma over what's gone on, as well as it just being a crime. The second kind of kidnap, it's something we all hear. We all hear about these really high net worth kidnappings, where people will do an awful lot of surveillance. There's an awful lot of observation. And one of the guys, they interview one of the guys who actually conducts kidnappings on the documentary, and he explains how they do it. He literally talks about how they will drive to privileged areas, wealthy areas, and monitor people's movements day to day. And a lot of the time, I always tell people this. I mean, when I wrote a book, as you know, called Monsters Live Amongst Us, and that title comes back and back again, or not to haunt me, but as a reminder that you really need to be careful in this world, because there are a lot of time there are people out there who will be monitoring you. You know, evil does exist in the world, sadly. And if you've got something that somebody thinks of a value, criminals are becoming a little bit more strategic, a little bit more thought through. And they will monitor you in an attempt to actually either abduct you or abduct someone in your family. Because what you get now is something that had happened many years ago, but it's resurfaced. There's something that are called tiger kidnappings. And this is where somebody is stalked like a tiger would stalk someone. And they will snatch someone, hold them hostage in order to pressure their family to do something. And a lot of the time, I think this used to happen years ago, I think, when post offices used to hold a lot more money and banks were generally easier to sort of get into. People's, like a bank manager's family, would be held hostage. But again, people are starting to do that now. Tiger kidnapping's becoming really, really current. I think we've all heard, we know that there'll actually be within this world, there'll be like terrorist gangs and political kidnappings. And, you know, there's always, for those people involved, that there's that sort of, they see it as that greater purpose behind it to do it, to actually make that demonstration. But here's the real one. This is the one that I think, if there's one bit of this whole evening that you listen to and take on board, this is the thing to be really aware of. This style of kidnapping has reached an epidemic proportion. And the sad thing is, a lot of the time, it doesn't even get reported because it is over so quickly, people don't even realize what's happened. Virtual kidnapping. If you, okay, consider this. You and I, Jack, are gentlemen of certain years, and we've seen this world move on. And you and I remember a time with no internet, 3 television channels, no mobile phone. The phone was at the end of the road, little red box. Put your money in, wait for the pips. However, your average person in the street these days, young, old, this mobile phone. It's your lifeline to everything, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You get separated from your mobile phone, you can be out of contact from everyone now. You can't always find a call box as easy as you used to. And if you get separated from your mobile phone and somebody has access to it, then how quickly and easy is it for someone to actually convince your family that you've been kidnapped? So what they do is they steal a phone. A lot of the time, the victims don't even know their phone's gone. They immediately contact the family and say, we've abducted your child, we've abducted your brother, your aunt, whoever. So what's the first thing people do? They go to call them on their mobiles. Who has the mobile? The person who's claiming that they've been abducted. So they get the mobile, they ring the mobile, and they get a strange voice. And it's terrifying. If you're a parent, it is absolutely terrifying. And what they do a very express style kidnapping, where they will literally say, right, we want several £100 now, within the next hour. And they go for short amounts of money, because they will target people who can literally get that money really quickly. Meanwhile, your son, your daughter, whoever, is blissfully unaware all this is going on. Don't even realize they've lost their phone or their phone's been taken. And they come home to find terrified parents. So really, really just take that one on board. It's one of the fastest growing crimes. It's virtual kidnapping. And if you're a parent, Jack, like we are, it can scare the bloody life out of you because you think your child has been taken and they haven't. They've just got hold of their phone. But we've become so plumbed into this now. We've become so attuned to everything that happened. If it doesn't happen on social media, it hasn't happened anywhere. If you can't get hold of someone immediately on their phone, I remember I was listening to Chris Rock recently, and he was doing a brilliant concert, and he was saying that he said when his parents were in a relationship, and he said they were like, his father would go to work, and he probably wouldn't see his mom for 8-9 hours. He said, that's it. If something happened, he didn't know about it. He said, these days, you go somewhere, they're in your pocket. You know everything they're doing, and you know what people have thought about it and what they've felt about it. And as this style of kidnapping relies on this constant source of communication, instant text back, WhatsApp, instant message, everything, instant messaging. And the minute we fall out of contact with someone, we get scared. The last one I want to actually talk about tonight is something that really impacts a lot more of us and has impacted the therapeutic world. And it's something that I now have to monitor and look out for. And it does fall into the kidnapping category. And there is a sort of psychological ransom, and that's unlawful detention. We now find in the UK there's a lot of illegal imprisonment. There's a lot of slavery going on, and sometimes that can be through illegally importing people into the country, forced marriages, long-term spousal abuse. 2 or 3 people have come to me at the moment, and they've suffered with long-term narcissistic coercive abuse. And the thing that they realize they're suffering from is the same trauma that someone like Terry Waite would have suffered. They were held in a semi-captive state and didn't even realize it. There's a marvelous book called, I think, Hostage at the Table. And it tells you it just reminds you how not to be held hostage by things in life, like your own thoughts, those coercive thoughts that other people can actually put upon you. So we almost come the full circle back to one of the very first talks we had about just being mindful of those relationships that you're in, and also being mindful of other people and the relationships they're in. There's more and more of this, and again, it's on the rise. People, because we're in the jolly good old safe UK, people don't think we're like Colombia. People don't think we're like Sierra Leone. We tend not to get too many, Somali pirates, off sort of like Yarmouth. But you do get cases of kidnapping quite frequently on a different level, on that unlawful detention level in the UK. Like I say, it's kind of moving. It's Jack. I know we always often stray sort of sometimes into your past, and I know you've always been very open to discussing things that have gone on in your world. But you must have seen yourself how that crime has evolved, how crime changes
at a scary rate. Absolute scary rate. It's gone from, it's gone from petty. How do I explain it? It's more organised now, and the gangs. The thing is, living living in just outside Norwich. Norwich is right on the cusp of county lines. Now, this
Yeah.
is something that I'm really passionate about in educating people on. You know, I was a vulnerable person, stuck in county lines when I was an addict, and I know people who have been the same, and the coercion that the gangs have in getting vulnerable people, disabled people, a lot of kids with Down syndrome and learning difficulties, because they can control them. Um, I'm by far a weak person physically, and now mentally I'm a lot stronger than I was. But when you're an addict, you've got that mentality, and I think that you are more you're more prone to be held in that sort of. I've been in crack houses when people have not paid and have been, stopped and not allowed to leave. Um, I've seen in my younger days criminals getting pulled in and made to kneel down or, tied up, and big scary men with baseball bats and things like this. It was a lot of it was psychological,
Yeah.
but you had that sort of, you see a big scary man with a baseball bat, a few of them walking around. You're going to think a lot harder than you usually do. But you see, the problem is nowadays that there's more of a psychological element to it.
Yeah.
Not only are the people at your end getting wiser and more empathetic, but kidnappers and criminals are getting more psychological in their techniques. So no longer is it smash and grab, or you know as much like you said, as much as pulling people off the street. It's more putting that psychological in, and scaring people into doing things or handing over money. I think it's more like scaring people into doing things like storing drugs and
Yeah.
you know delivering them and things like that. Um, and it's scary that the inner city gangs have come into Norwich. It's now spilling out into the sort of small towns on the outskirts. Um, and I don't get scared of things quite easily, but I've got family, and there are people around me that I know that have had no criminal inclination whatsoever, and they're quite rightly scared. Um, you look at the psychology of a kidnapper and the psychology of the kidnappee, and yeah, although they're a juxtaposition, it's I don't know, it's more menacing. It's more menacing,
Yeah.
than bashing somebody around a kneecap. That's over within a few minutes. Whereas,
Fear, the fear of pain, the psychology of potential pain is 10 times more debilitating than the actual pain itself. Because if somebody breaks your kneecap, you can't actually run anywhere. But if somebody says you run and you get that for me, as I will break your kneecap, you're going to do it out of fear of having your kneecap broken.
yeah,
There's there's a real there's something so important there that you've hit upon, the actual psychology of it. Um, I'm going to talk to you a little bit sort of later on about one of the most celebrated and one of the most famous situations ever, where a young guy who just happened to be a negotiation student was actually, it happened in the UK, was actually taken and abducted guys in broad daylight. And I'll take you through the story, and I'll take you through the points of what he did. And the guy is an absolute negotiation genius. He just had the why and the wherefore to actually psychologically get the better of the people who had taken him hostage, but not in that sort of clever ass way that we imagine people do. You know, he wasn't sort of clever in a smart ass way. It's there was I mentioned the TV series Kidnap and Ransom with Trevor Reed, and he trained with K&R Consultants, and whoever wrote it and the scripts, and they got the character so spot on. And one of the things that you always saw his character doing was playing chess. He was an avid chess player, and this game of psychological chess that you play with these people can just be so subtle, can be so you don't even realize these slight moves that are going on. And it's like something you said just resonated with me. Just the sight of the guys walking around with a baseball bats. That's all you need. It is literally all you need. It's that element of pressure being applied to someone, because we have two sovereign masters in life: pleasure and pain. Or the perception of. You go and do things that you perceive are going to feel nice and pleasurable, and you move away quite wisely from those things that you feel are going to be bad and harmful for you. So when you feel a situation is coming towards you that's harmful, you will do what you can to move to somewhere else. Yeah. So it is like you said, it's that the psychology of fear, and the criminal psychology now is, you don't get smash and grab anymore. You literally do get that very slow, sly, underhanded coercion that is far more effective. And a lot of the time you can't always prove it, because people will just be coerced into a situation. There's something I was reading about not so long ago, and there's a bit of a mantra of mine. Now I know we're talking kind of different worlds away, but there was something that someone had said to me 4 or 5 days ago. I was having a chat with a good friend about doing this talk, and they went, "What would you do if you were abroad and you had gone to somewhere where," and a lot of the time we will go to places. Somebody was telling me recently that their parents are going to Grenada, and I laughed because the last time I heard anything about Grenada, I just remembered the Americans invading it, and I know the world moves on. They're not. That's all over now. But a lot of the time, we will go to them, and my niece, who's an incredible young lady, went and worked in South America, in some very, very rough areas, and her parents were terrified, but she went out there and she did it. And my other niece is now frontline in the NHS, and again, they're facing things on a daily basis that have conflict and stress involved in them. But somebody said to me, "What would you do? What would happen? What are your thoughts to what you should do if something like that happens?" And I know this sounds odd. The first thing that people always advise, if you go abroad and you're in that situation, excuse me, where something like that has happened, is don't try and deal with it yourself. Any kidnap and ransom situation, for goodness sake, get a professional. Ben Lopez, that wrote the book on kidnap and ransom consultancy, said the one thing that amazed him every single time before he was involved in any case was people had just gone and thought, well, do you know what? I'll get a lawyer to deal with them. We're talking hardened criminals.
Mm.
The local priest might be helpful. My best friend, like people were hiring anyone. Do you know, actually, do you know you'd be probably better off hiring an estate agent?
Yeah.
When I worked in property negotiation, I started writing a blog. I haven't finished it yet. The similarities. In fact, I went and gave a talk once to some estate agents, and this is what we were talking about. The similarities between closing a housing deal and kidnap and ransom consultancy are phenomenal. They are so close. It's unbelievable. So I always say to people, if anything like happens to anyone, be really mindful. Hire a professional. If somebody hasn't got insurance, be careful. And the other thing is, these things, don't expect them to end quickly. Sometimes they can go on for weeks. Some of them have gone on for years. Some cases where people have been held captive. Be careful. Be careful when you go abroad who you deal with, because a lot of the time when people have been abducted, the people who they're approached by, who say they're going to help them, are actually part of the team that have abducted them in the first place. So you need to be really mindful about getting a skilled operator when you're in. People will talk about always getting proof of life, making sure, like in these virtual kidnappings, that somebody has actually been kidnapped. And this is where you and I have both sort of witnessed things maybe from different sides, is that absolute psychological pressure that will be applied. Because the bottom line is here, people are working and feeding off of your emotions. The good thing is, if there is good news, and I know this sounds like a bizarre thing to say, is if somebody gets abducted by someone in a kidnap for ransom case, and they're a professional kidnapper, what they actually want is money. They don't want to harm someone. This is not a political thing where they're going to kill someone to make a point. A lot of the time, people will actually pretend that they are part of a political organization, but they're not. They more than likely need money for the weekend for drugs and girls and alcohol. So people do build up these relationships with kidnappers, and they will negotiate for money. They'll always come down massively on what they've asked for, but most people do come back in one piece. Sadly, if they're not careful, they get abducted again by the same crew because they realise they're a rich source. So there's loads, and I'm sort of giving away techniques and tricks. There's loads of things that actual consultants will do to actually ensure that doesn't happen. There is something that I wanted to talk about, and it might take a little bit of time. I just want to I made a few notes. I don't often make notes, but I actually did on this because this was something that was one of the most fascinating cases that I've ever come across in all my years. And I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about, but there are about 7 or 8 different points here. And we're almost going to move into a little bit of self-development here as well, Jack, which I know something's a passion of yours as well. This is the most extreme negotiation strategy you can ever implement. And it's something that anyone could do. And it was part of my message that I actually say to people is, should something happen to you or your loved ones, you actually get put into a situation, particularly if it's one of these tiger kidnappings or it's an express kidnapping, don't always feel that you are helpless. Obviously, first and foremost, and I always go back to the Karate Kid, when he says, best way to avoid a punch, don't be there. Don't put yourself into a situation where you are likely to be abducted. And sometimes, and you'll see it on the documentary, some of the people who've been abducted, they will, it's like, kind of, they'll go, yeah, do you know what? I don't know what I was doing there in the first place. It probably wasn't a great idea for me to actually walk down that road on my own in the middle of the night and take that same journey every single evening. Always be mindful of your surroundings. We were trained to do this when we used to do assertive outreach within the work that I do now. You know, we'll always have people that know where we are. We're always mindful of where we park. We always use our peripheral vision, what's going on around us. And it is one of the most obvious things of all is just please be mindful of your surroundings. The story I'm about to tell you is completely true. And it happened not that long ago. And the young man in question, and again, it's that situation where we think, why didn't I do that in the first place? Was abducted in broad daylight by 3 men. He didn't lock his car door. His car door was unlocked. So it happened literally in the middle of the day. He was sat in his car and somebody tapped on his window. He looked to one side and immediately his doors open and 3 guys got in. One of them put a knife to his throat and just said, drive. And they made him drive the beaten track off to a really rough, isolated area. So this guy actually, he did something rather amazing. He had a rather cool level about him and he had a good demeanor. He kind of realized straight away, he started to think, instead of like a victim, he started to think like a negotiator. And he kind of sat and thought to us, right, driven to a destination and I don't know where I'm going. There's 3 guys who are all bigger than me. I'm in their territory. They're all a lot tougher than I am. One of them's got a knife to my throat. My options of fighting, rule them out. My options of running away, forget it. I'm just not going to make it. So what he actually did was he kind of considered, he did something that people don't do. It's called perceptual positioning. He put himself in their shoes. And he asked himself, what do they want? Might want my car. It's not worth much. They probably want money. And he thought, okay, I can do that. I've got limited resources, but I've got some money. They're probably not going to kill me, despite what they've said. They've said that they're going to kill me if I don't do what they want. People, let's be realistic about it, Jack. You know, if somebody gets abducted and the ATM's turned over, that's pretty bad. But if somebody gets killed, the police will find them. It becomes high profile. They will find them, and if they get caught, they will go away for a long time. So he kind of started estimating all the odds in his head, and he thought, right, what I need to do here is to actually work out a few alternatives. And the first thing that he did was he looked at the principle of where there is no negotiation, make one. He actually started to create a negotiation where one did not exist between him, and the guys who abducted him. So what he realized was they needed him alive. So he was kind of okay with him being taken off to ATMs. But what they realized was that they could get a lot more money if he was to go into the bank and actually withdraw it all in one go. Now, He knew what his worst alternative to negotiation was. He thought, if I don't negotiate, they're going to kick the hell out of me. They might knife me. My best alternative is actually kind of getting away from these guys, but only after maybe I've given them some of what they want. So what he started to do was, while they were driving, while they were taking him there, was he started chatting to them. He started talking to these guys, and he actually started playing along and saying, look, okay, I understand this is going to happen. I know this is what you need to do. That's where my bank is. I'll be honest with you. They don't know me in there. I don't use it a lot. I will go in there. I will attempt to do this. And they'd sort of countered this move. They said, well, we found your parents' address. If you try and pull a fast one, we're going to go and get them. So he thought, okay, something rather amazing happened. When he was walking to the bank, he got chatting to one of the guys. And because he started to build at this level of empathy with him, the guy actually apologized. The guy went, look, I'm really sorry about this. But he didn't, he didn't get clever here. He didn't go, oh, right, come on, look, leave this life of crime. Come on, run off with me, and we'll be all right. And I'll tell them that you were good to me. He just kept talking to him. He went, okay, all right. And the guy went, look, I'm sorry. He went, no, it's fine, it's fine. So he started to build up a level of trust with one of the guys and got a little bit of empathy with him. He knew, and he looked at these three elements, and they're really, really important within the process. After he started to build up some trust and some empathy, he started to communicate. He realized there were no great alternatives. He also realized, he took full stock of what the actual situation was. It was a blag. It's like Die Hard. At the end of the day, like he was just after cash. That's what it was really about. They just wanted money. They didn't want to harm him. But he also realized something else massively important. And it's the most important principle in any kidnap and ransom ever. And that is time. Time is phenomenal. A lot of the time, kidnap consultants, all they do is buy time. They just push back and they push back and they push back, because they know the longer that somebody has a hostage being held by them, it's costing them more money. There's more resources. They have to pay the crew more, and they're having to wait longer and longer for that payout. So he knew that these guys only had limited. He thought, they're going to have to go home. They're going to have to go home for their tea at some point, and I'm going to be missed after a point. So he thought, time's on my side. So he did say, well, look, we can do this. We can and they wanted everything done as quick as possible. And he was saying, well, maybe, I can get this done for you, but maybe it's better if we try the bank across town where they do know me. So we really started stalling for time a little bit. He knew that he had very little power in it, and there was no power struggle, but he knew he had this absolute situation on his hand. So he identified the interests of these guys. He knew what their interests were. The second thing he knew he had to do was the most hardest thing of all. And I say it all the time, but it is such a difficult thing to do in any situation. He took control of his emotions. Just took control, kept that level of calmness. Do you ever watch Game of Thrones?
No.
Okay. If for anyone that's watched it, my favorite character in it was Peter Dinklage's character, Tyrion Lannister. Now, within the whole series of Game of Thrones, Tyrion Lannister is probably, due to his stature, the physically weakest person in the whole show. Yet he survives more incursions, more combat. Every major cull, Tyrion walks through it every time. And this is what he does. And whoever, George R. R. Martin would just make one of the greatest negotiators. All Tyrion Lannister ever says, whenever he gets kidnapped and he gets abducted and he gets held against his will, all he ever says to his abductors are, "What do you want?" All he asks, "What do you want? What do you need?" And he puts himself in a position where even he's, played by Peter Dinklage, it's like dealing with these great big guys, armed to the teeth. And he said, "Well, what do you want?" And he actually gets to that situation where he will identify his interests. He'll align his interests with theirs and make them see that his best interests are in their best interests. So this guy, literally knew these guys are going to live because I can go into a bank and I can get the money out. So we aligned that. He established common ground with them. He also did something very clever. He started to look at what their options were, and he realized their options were very limited. So he could keep that negotiation going on common ground. He kept talking to them. He reinforced the trust with them. And he kept doing it in such a way that none of that trust was really taken for granted. So actually, there was a really good rapport with these guys who I think the outcome is kind of low key, but it was one of the best outcomes ever. He went to the bank. He got some money out because he couldn't get it all out, but it had taken so long. He hadn't given them any fuss. He hadn't sworn at them. He hadn't abused them. He hadn't been stupid. He hadn't said, "Whoa, this is going to happen when I get out of here." They just let him go. They just said, "Yeah, okay. All right, dog, off you get." And this one guy, again, he just said, I'm really sorry. And he went, "It's all right." And, he didn't say, "Well, if you let me go now, I won't tell the police," because he knew they were going to tell the police. He didn't treat them like morons. He treated them, and here's the thing, here's the controversial part, Jack. He treated them like professionals. And I often tell people this. People say, when you negotiate, when you talk to people and there's something going on that's slightly underhand, and even when people are not behaving in a way they should, what do? I treat them like professionals. Talk to them professionally. Talk to people with a level of courtesy, even those people who don't really deserve it. And you do get a much better response. And you have to remember, you will have an outcome that you are looking for. And a lot of the time, that outcome is you getting out of the situation in one piece. So sometimes my methods and other people's methods, they have to be regulated by the circumstances around them. Now, this has become a really celebrated case. And just looking at the way that guy dealt with the people around him has been looked at as, it's literally called an extreme negotiation strategy. If anyone ever wants to know what it is, I will try and type down the bare sort of bones of how it works. But I think with the best will in the world, you and I, Jack, are absolute realists when it comes to the world of crime and organized crime and professional crime. The police can be everywhere at every single point to always make sure you are safe and you're well. We live in a society that has rules and regulations, and we know that if somebody gets caught, they will go to prison and possibly stay there for a very long time. But we know there has to be that level of self-governance and self-protection. So I think sometimes the best advice is, and I know it's so hard to do, if something like this happens to your loved one, just keep calm. Remember, there's an outcome here that these people want, and it's hard to do, because, and this is why they have a third-party negotiator, because they will treat it like a business transaction. And it's hard for you to treat it like, because all you want to do is get and bring their necks. because they've got a member of your family, or you believe they've got a member of your family. Or do you know what? There's something else that was epidemic that I haven't mentioned that happened in lockdown, and it's still going on, and that's pet abduction.
Dogs.
Dogs and cats, the number of poor folk. And there's a case that I was studying a while ago, and it was heartbreaking. The lady who was told, here's the thing. This is like the tiger kidnapping. This is how these people prey on you. They will go for an app. They'll look at the that up our street app or local, whatever it's called. And every now and again, you'll get some lovely little old lady or some lovely, and they'll say, "My little dog's gone missing," and my dog means the world to me. Now I've got a cat, and I'm convinced, Jack, that it's narcissistic and psychotic. It's the most evil creature I've ever seen in my life. But God damn it, I quite like it. And if anything happened to Harvey, I'd probably be a bit upset. We get strong attachments to our animals, and this lady had just put on social media, "Dog's gone." Immediately got a call from a guy. "Yeah, got your dog. Now it is, but it's going to cost you." And I think several times, sadly, she sent them money time after time, but never got her dog. And it happened, it became a real epidemic. Sometimes people are abducting animals. Sometimes they were just literally doing like a virtual kidnapping. You've got to take stock of the situation. You've got to take stock of your emotions when something like this happens. And it is a case in certain situations where you do have to get the professionals in. You know, you call the police service. You know, if something like this has happened to you, don't be intimidated. Or if it's a situation that many people get put in where there's no police around, just remember, if there's a threat of life here, your life is precious. It is more precious than the money in your bank. Don't be a hero. A lot of the time, and you'll hear these guys say it if you watch this documentary, it is just business for us. And I don't condone it. And a lot of the time people, they do say about the kidnap and ransom industry is that actual K&R consultants, not that are part of the problem, but if they didn't exist, people say abductions wouldn't take place. I tend not to believe that because they took place before the K&R industry. You know, it was always happening. It's happened since the dawn of flipping time. You know, if you go back into your Bible, you know, there's cases there where people were held hostage against their will and held for ransom. So it's not a case of, you know, K&R consultants literally fuel the industry. So just always be mindful. These people, they don't want you dead. They won't kill you, because if they get caught, they don't want to be done for murder, but they will risk being done for a bit of abduction. You know, it's pretty low on their scale. I think I'm nearly done, Jack. I didn't realise how long I've been talking.
No, that's cool, mate. I did one when I was writing the book about escaping human trafficking, and I was speaking to some of the girls and guys, and it came down to, you know, what you said about, you know, coercion. I spoke to very few that were like from like Eastern European countries and stuff. Not that I did, but you know, a lot of them were in America or here. A lot of them were coerced by parents, aunts and uncles, groomed. That seems to be the in word at the minute. Groomed into a certain way of life, even by people, you know, like you said, within certain public services. and public, like police and things like that in America, and that's what initially came to my head when you said that you wanted to speak about kidnap and coercion and things like that, because
Yeah.
there are so many. This is a real passion of mine about educating about human trafficking, sexual slavery, and exploitation. Um, I'm very attached to some of these people, and
Yeah.
the fact that they were not just coerced into it, but they were kidnapped from their own country and brought over here and convinced to live a certain life that sex work or prostitution, whatever you choose to call it, is better than the alternative. They're working in £1 million flats in city centres, um, and they've been driven around in high profile sports cars, and you know you you can polish but as you say, you can polish a turd, it's still a turd. You can put a name on it and you can call it an escort, but
Yeah.
it's still sex work. And some of the things that they're threatened with, and it's again, I think it's on the BBC iPlayer, and Channel 4 iPlayer as well. There's several good documentaries about some of the psychology of these human traffickers, and how they kidnap young women, telling them that they're going to be models, and then taking their, bringing them over here and taking their passport. Something as simple as that. Um, the human trafficking. It's more likely. You see things, you see films like Taken and things like that, and that does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't. It does, but you're more likely to be taken by someone into sexual slavery by someone or by a family member,
Yeah.
but by a parent, by an uncle, and sold into it. Jessie Hepburn being one of them from the book. She was very open and honest um, about it. Parents and grandparents and things like that. And that's the world we're living in. You see it every time you look on Facebook. Sorry if I'm ranting a bit, but
No, go for it.
every time you look on Facebook, you see these um, hunter posts where they're getting some guy that they, or woman, some women as well, that they've ensnared. They've ensnared paedophiles. And you're seeing that, and then you see, it's more insidious. It's more insidious. I mean, all I had to worry about when I was a kid was not getting caught pinching or not getting caught fighting in small town Yorkshire. Not that there wasn't organised crime, because there very obviously was, but it's more insidious now. It's not run by families like it used to be, and it's not, or if it is, it's run by like mafias and organised crime gangs from London or Luton or wherever it is, and it's coming into small towns like where I live. It's coming into cities where you wouldn't think it would be. London, you kind of think, well, I kind of expect that. Manchester, some of the bigger, well-known cities, and then Norwich, you don't think, well, Norwich would be that sort of insidious, or towns like Wyndham or Caister or things like that. But I know from personal experience that there are people within a 10-mile radius of where I live that have been trafficked, that have been kidnapped, that have been groomed, that are, you know, and it's just, I guess that worries me more than anything else. That's just why I really wanted to get you on and talk about, that's why I got excited when you said you were going to talk about it, because I think that, if there is anybody still watching, and I think there are, but, I think that we need to educate, we need to arm people with the right tools, because it's not so much now you're going out and getting mugged, like you say, you're going out and you're getting kidnapped, or you're going out, your phone's getting nicked, and your family's getting told you've been kidnapped. So much cybercrime going on. It's a whole new level. We didn't have to deal with this when
We didn't,
we
did
were
we?
younger. I told my kids that I was around before the internet, and they didn't believe me. And it's like, it's just, I guess it's more anonymous,
Yeah.
which is more insidious to me.
It's like anything else, though, Jack. That counter to it is education. It's education. It's why we're here. It's why we're giving this talk tonight. It's okay. I mean, I've gone off on some real extremes. We've gone on spoken about everything from the Waco siege to, kidnap and ransom consultancy in South America. We've gone to every different possible sort of like area we can. But within the middle of that, the reality is that, and it's the one thing that still kind of bothers me slightly, is people's inability to recognize that it could happen. Somebody might be sitting there thinking, there's a guy from Norfolk talking about kidnap and ransom consultancy, hostage negotiation, tiger kidnapping. Why is a guy from sleepy old Norfolk talking about that? Because the reality is, such as when you talk about sex trafficking, is it's happening around us. I mean, county lines. I mean, there's been incidents, and it's gone right up on the cusp of some of the things we've been talking about. Is people's homes have been like cuckooed. People have been almost held hostage in their own home, while people have just gone in and used their facilities and literally used it as a drop house. It's there's not burglars on every corner, but it is out there, and you can protect yourself from it. And one of the biggest ways is just that awareness of opening your eyes and realizing that it does go on. Like sadly, you cannot trust every single person you meet. And you do have to keep a sharp eye about you, because if not, I mean, the number of cases I get involved in and the external training I now have to do with coercion, county lines, people being almost brainwashed into joining certain sections of radicalization. And this is Norwich, this is Norfolk, we never used to. I remember when I first moved to Norwich, I just remember thinking how different it was, and now it's very, very different. And there's been lots of good things that have happened in Norfolk and Norwich. It's become very multicultural, and for a guy like me from Birmingham, I'll say, well, it's become very multicultural. That's nice, because I like that, because that's kind of what I grew up with. But as well as that, there's lots of negative elements, like you say, like county lines. Norfolk's become more open. Norwich has become more open. There's more people going backwards and forwards. When I moved here, I don't think anyone even had a clue where it was. And I was just going to this lovely, and it is still a beautiful, beautiful city. And I'm so blessed to live in it. I think it's like the most gorgeous county in the world to live in. But we have to just protect it, and we have to be open about the realities. of crime in all its form. And sadly, this new style of, like you say, more psychological crime is on the rise.
I think that, I mean, people are getting switched on now. You know, the internet's about, and you've got people that are just a bit older than us that are, you know, are now sort of getting sort of switched on to the way that it is. But you know, coercion's always happened. It's always happened wherever there's a vulnerable person,
Yeah,
there will always be a person there that will try and coerce that person to get what they want or what they need. That's a really sad fact of life, and it breaks my heart. Um, but I will say that I do know that people switch off to their surroundings. They think if you know, it's kind of mind off matter. If they don't see it, it's not affecting them, but it is, and it
yeah,
does, because, like you say, it's coming closer to home. You know, I've got a guy coming on in the next few weeks that was really, um, you know, affected by county lines as an addict, um, and you know, we're going to be talking about some of the things that happened. I know people that have, you know, that have worked in trying to combat county lines, and you know, before it was called county lines, it was still happening. It just didn't have you know, that name. It was just, I suppose, coercion is what they called it. But um, I think now, with the internet, it's such a lovely, wonderful place, and I try to tell my kids, and I try to educate my kids on some of the dangers that, you know, you don't always know who you're talking to.
no,
Um, and there are people out there that will really sort of wish harm on you because you're doing something good. I'm now dealing with trolls. I never thought I would have to deal with that. I've dealt with keyboard warriors before, but I'm dealing with some real trolls, you know, through YouTube and through Facebook and stuff like that. And I try to sit on the fence and I try to see everybody's side. Over this past year, I've dealt with more trolls than anything else, and that's a real psychological thing from there, because they do know how to get your nerve up. They do know the things to say. They will go through your profile. They will pick everything that they can. They will, you know, nobody's truly anonymous. You know, you will always get a hit on Google. So they, you know, especially when you do what I do. So I'm way open to people, and people can say the most hurtful things, um, to try and gain an upper hand on you, and to try and get you to quit. And you know, all right, it's not kidnapping, it's not thing, but it is sort of dangerous coercion, trying to get you to stop doing what you're doing. I've been threatened by human traffickers in my time. I've been, you know, um, called disgusting because I wrote a book on it, and yeah, they're the people that I had to deal with, the keyboard warriors. But I think there are so many people out there that are so ill prepared. There are people that, you know, can brush it off and you know, let it go like a off water off a duck's back. But then you've got people like me that has a serious, and you that have an empathy for certain
yes,
members of society, and an empathy and a real sort of deep rooted feeling for, you know, like me with prisoners and you know, the trafficked, anybody that doesn't have a voice, because I never had a voice, which is why I use this to give other people a voice, because I never felt that I had a voice, because I had that taken away from me, because I was called stupid, I was called daft. I was told to man up, and all these things then take your voice away. So I've fought to get my voice back, and I've fought to do this, and there are so many people out there that will fight to get you to just quit. And we need education on it, not just because there's so much, people's accounts are getting taken over through psychological techniques, through dropping messages through Messenger, not just phishing scams like click this
I
link.
mentioned a book earlier on, Jack, called Hostage at the Table. And I was attracted to it because it said the word hostage in it. And I was recommended it. I was doing a course once on brief solution focused therapy. And the two guys that were doing it were a couple of coppers. It was really interesting. And they actually said, have a look at this book. You might find it fascinating. And exactly what you've just mentioned is another form of hostage taking, of kidnap taking, and that is that psychological taking of someone's mind, where the human body is free, but it's being so aware of what is going on around you, is who is taking you hostage psychologically, who is literally keeping you held captive. And I spoke to a lovely lady recently on the phone who doesn't live in a bad situation. I mean, in fact, if I described the situation that was going on around her to you, you'd be like, you wouldn't even shrug your shoulders. You'd be like, yeah, right. But to her, it's really awful. It's really, really shocking. Yeah. And you've got to respect that and respect her. And she is very much being held hostage by the people around her who probably don't even realize the impact they're having. But it's her mindset where she is. And we had a great conversation today. And I kind of thought there was a little bit of moving forwards, of moving on from this. So I think it is that, you get trolls, you get keyboard warriors, etc. And you'll always get someone, there has to be someone out there who will just not like what you've got to say and want to bang it out onto a keyboard for whatever reason. And it's important that you don't allow those people to hold you hostage. It's important that you aren't kidnapped and held to ransom by their negativity, I think. Have you get to take a look at the book Hostage at the Table? It's fascinating. It's got a great story at the beginning.
I never actually thought of it like that. You know
what? Somebody once wrote in a book, and it was probably Chris Voss. He said one of the greatest hostage negotiators of our time is probably Oprah Winfrey. What? And I hadn't thought about it till you watch her interview people. And this is what I always aspire to. He said, what she allows people to do is allows those captive thoughts to be released. And those people are having their thoughts held hostage. I try and help them release the thoughts that are being held. And the way she talks to people, if you watch some of the old classic interviews, not some of the more recent stuff, but some of the earlier things, the way she talks to people, the way she responds, she really allows the thoughts to be freed up. And it's in any negotiation, whether it's a kidnap, whether it's a hostage negotiation, whether it's anything at all, what you're aiming to do is you're aiming to almost be a therapist to someone. You're allowing them to free the thoughts. And when those thoughts free, when you've been released, they're well on the road to recovery.
I did want to just bring up one more thing, really.
Please do.
Talk about it. And I want to talk to some of the Christians out there as well. before I, found this church that is was vulnerable. I was involved with several churches, but one of them I believe to be more cultish. It was a church. I'm not going to mention names and things like that, but I will say it was a church that told you it was a home. It was your home. So when you went there, they said you're coming home. They used blatant NLP techniques. Um, when it comes down to the music and mimicking heartbeat with a bass speaker on the floor, so that when they double up that heartbeat, it's then going through your feet, and then it's creating certain frames of mind, and it's creating things in your body, and it's making you feel a certain way. They're using certain trigger words. I want to say to people, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this as well. I want to say to people, not every church is like that, um, but there are places out there that will try and pull you in because they want something from you, like we've spoken about tonight. With some of my dangers, it does happen. It does happen in Norwich, and it happens everywhere. And it's a sad. It really breaks my heart of people using faith and other people's faith to make money or to get a certain credence, or to get a certain stature in the community. It really is. For me, it's one of the sort of things that I would really find hard to forgive. And I'm very lucky. Like I say, I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed to have a church that is like a family, that are very caring uh, towards us. They've been there since the start, since the whole thing. Since I was in hospital and things like that. Um, but I do believe that there are people out there that will use your faith to try and better themselves. So what I want to do is give people a little bit of education, and I want to get Jason's view on how we can start to combat that.
It's fascinating that you mention NLP, and I've always believed of all the therapies. I mean, I'm a master NLP practitioner. It's one of those therapies that can be, and I did some work today with a young lady, literally just about talking about NLP techniques of the internal voice, of kind of moving that negative internal voice away, examining it, getting images, and kind of, getting rid of negative images. But you are so correct. If you spin that engine the other way with NLP, as with anything like the internet, it can be a double-edged sword, and it can be used literally to coerce and manipulate. I think just some of the things that you're describing, Jack, sound very cultish. The use of noise, the use of imagery, the use of actually connecting at like a vibration to the body and pumping that
Yep.
through the system, and at the almost in a Pavlovian way, dropping a word in, dropping a word in, dropping a word in. It does kind of have that sort of like well, not therapeutic, but that hypnosis effect upon you. I think, like anything, I think the main thing is it's what question it. Like church can be many things to many people, and clubs and societies and groups. If something just doesn't seem right, and it's okay to question it. It is okay. I was saying to Jack before we kind of got started that I nearly ended up in a position working within the church as a mediator. And some of the things that I might have possibly have been faced with there would have been absolutely fascinating. But you know that there are those differences that people have within church communities. I don't know, probably over where the flowers went, or what music was going to be played in what order, etc. But I think whenever you get that element where it feels wrong, it feels slightly cultish, where you have that enigmatic figure, and where you are asked to start providing something other than your love, other than, because it's a real, faith is a real contentious issue. And I often talk with clients that come and see me about beliefs and values, and the beliefs are solid. Beliefs are, like you can build a whole empire on a belief, but if you knock the legs away from under a belief, it falls apart pretty quickly. So you have to be really careful. And it's when people get you to examine your beliefs, when people get you to start saying, well, I know you've been told that your whole life, but maybe you ought to look at it this way. It's something, whenever you enter something like it, it's something you should move freely towards. You shouldn't feel that if you moved away from it, it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part. It's like anything. Try and test out the parameters of what happens when you move away from it. If do people like say, we're free to welcome you in, and you know what, we're free to let you go, and if you ever come back to us, that's your decision, and that's a decision that you've made positively. But if it's like, whoa, well, if you go away from us, you might not be able to come back, and this is what you're missing. I think those are the questions. Abusive narcissistic relationship. It's that when people are well, you'll never find someone as good as me, and no one else will want you, and and particularly somebody saying this is your home. This is your home. It can be a home. It can be a spiritual home for you, but it's not necessarily your home. People will always use those coercive words. In Monsters Live Amongst Us, the one thing I wrote about was narcissists love the word our relationship. They love the words our relationship. Our relationship shouldn't be like that. I thought our relationship was going to be better. And it is that immediately, it's that drawing you in and making you part of something. And like I say, you only notice it, and I bet you noticed it when you actually went, wait a minute, there's something not right here. And you kind of took yourself away from it. And when you view it from a distance, you go, oh my God, what was I doing?
Well, I noticed it more when I found a church that actually treated you with respect and as a loving family member, that don't bang on about, welcome home, welcome home, welcome home, but say, we are family, and family help each other, and this is what we do, and this is, we've had no end of help from the church, and the community gets no end of help from our church at Hope Community. But I've been involved in churches that were absolutely fine when my church says, all right, if you can donate, that would be great. We're trying to buy this building, we're trying to put more into the community. If not, then just do what you can to get the word around. And they try and help people, with food club and things like that. Whereas I've been involved in churches that have been like, well, what are you bringing to the table? You're part of this church now.
Yeah.
Where's the 10%? So when I was on the dole, I was having to give 10% of my dole to the church. God, and they were saying, well, you give that and God will provide. And we're a family that kind of live on faith. We do. you know, sometimes there are bills that come in and things that come in, and we don't know what's going to get paid, um, and you know, it does happen, but you know, we're not forced to, you know, we don't get treated any different. Whereas when I was made homeless with the other church, um, I was treated kind of like a second class citizen. So what I would say to people is, if it seems unbiblical, if it feels, listen to that voice, you know, that voice of reason. If it seems unbiblical, if it feels unbiblical, it probably is unbiblical. If it feels wrong, um, if you feel that you're not being given the right advice, that you've been led a way that seems counterintuitive to your morals, it probably is unbiblical. Um, you know, speak to your church leaders, make sure that everything is in line, um, because a church leadership that is open is honest. And if they're going to be open and honest, and they're going to be held accountable for the work that they do, like, you know, there are quite a few churches here in Wyndham, and they're all hold themselves accountable, and they're all sort of, you know, that they will show you how they work, and you know, they will help you through. And I think that if it because I've spoken to people that have had some real difficulties with churches, and real difficulties with leaders that have told them one thing, and you know, even down to the fact some of the guests that I've had on here, like Mama Rimba, that was abused in the church, from a child. Um, it's it is a real it's happening a lot more these days. It's happening a lot more these days. Um, and as a Christian, as a man of faith, I invite people to ask me about my faith. I invite questions, but you know, I also you know, invite people to ask questions to church leadership, and hold them accountable, because they should be, they need to be. Um, and like you said, Jason, just be switched on to your surroundings. Um,
Yeah.
if you've been told, if you're sat in a church and you've been told to hate a certain way of life, it's not biblical. So you need to look at it, um, and yeah, just seek the right help, really. Like you said about, you know, make sure you find the right person for the job. There are
Never
people
be
out
afraid to challenge. Always talk with a professional. Never be afraid to challenge. If someone's genuine, they will accept that challenge. And if, like I say, never be afraid to walk away either, Jack.
there. No, exactly, exactly. I know people that have walked away from churches and doing other churches. You know, there are some people that have walked away and never walked back in. It's sad when relationships break down between church leadership and its members. You know, that's how churches fail, and it gives churches a bad name, when in fact that, you know, they are, most of them are charitable organisations that do a lot of good within the
Yeah.
communities. And you know, it's about discernment. You have to discern. Um, Most community churches are, you know, are in it for the community, hence the name community churches. But there are, um, places that don't actually call themselves a church, might not actually call themselves a church, or they do call themselves a church, but they have a certain structure, that is, seems like a pyramid scheme. that
Yeah.
you, you know, and they don't, they're not open with you. It's difficult. I wanted to broach it a few times, but not really sort of known how to do it. I think that you know I've been praying for an opportunity, and I think this was the opportunity that I needed to
Good.
broach it, because we are speaking about actual coercion and control, and
Yeah.
there are people out there that will try to coerce you. Um, and I think that we need to learn to discern between those that mean us good and those that don't. And of course, there are always good people in a church and there are negative people in a church. It will always happen. You've never got a perfect balance of that in a church. But
No.
you know, I would just say, talk to people about it, and if they're willing to talk to you, then it's probably a good place. If they're not willing to talk to you and hush you off, I think you're going to be wanting to move.
It's another form of being held captive, isn't it? Which I
It
think is the
is.
overarching theme that we've spoken about it today, and just important to free yourself from.
It is.
Jack, it's been great. It's been really good talking to you this evening. Thank
Yeah,
you
I've
so
enjoyed it
much
as
for giving.
always.
Thank you so much for giving me 2 hours of your time, and for coming back on the accidental journalists 1 year
Yeah,
in.
a year in. Yeah. You know, this is actually probably the first Shed X, because you know I called it Shed X, didn't I? And it was it was
Yeah,
from my living
I
room because
like
I couldn't get
FedEx.
internet in the shed. You know, so it's I've been doing it for my shed for quite a while, but you know it's I absolutely love doing this. You know, I've found a calling. It's not always easy. Um, you know, but it's you know it is a challenge. But I really do enjoy doing it. If you've been affected by anything that we've spoken to tonight, please feel free to contact me, to contact Jason.
Yeah,
If you need any advice, if you need signposting, we will do that. Because some of these things are really prevalent at the moment. If you feel like you are in a relationship that you are being coerced, um, send me an email asking about my line of merchandise, asking about my t-shirts, or asking about my t-shirts. Send me an email asking about my t-shirts, where you can get an accidental journalist t-shirt from. If you do that, I will know to signpost you to the right place. I will know to try and get your help, and I will get Jason involved in doing that, and trying to find a resolution to your problem, because you should never ever feel stuck. And I know it's difficult, but there is a way out, even though you don't always see it. Um, you know, you shouldn't be made to do things that you really don't want to be doing. So yeah, t-shirts. Ask about the accidental journalist t-shirts, and I know whom to contact after that. Jason, it's been an absolute pleasure. I am going to
thank you.
cut this off, and then we'll just have a quick chat. Um, but I'm just going to cut the feed. So, as always, cheers, guys. I'm going to talk to a couple of people this week about getting on in the next couple of weeks. Then we're going to take a break, like I said this morning. I'm going to take a break over Christmas, and start with season 2 in the new year. Cheers, guys. I'll see you soon.